everyone, and welcome back to Art a la Carte for Watercolor Wednesdays. And this episode is going to be all about brush care, taking care of your paper, and we're going to talk about water. In our last video, I talked to you all about the different kinds of brushes that are out there and then gave you the recommendations of the brushes that I use. But I want to talk to you a little bit about taking care of your brushes, especially if you decide to go with more expensive brushes. You definitely want to take care of it. But any brush that you have, as long as you take care of it, it's going to last you a long time. This is a sample here of two of the exact same brushes. They're both size 4 flat round brushes. This brush here I've had for probably about 5 years or so, and this one I just bought this year. And so you can kind of see there's a little bit of the wear and tear on the brush that I've been using for quite a while. Mainly the reason I want is because I really wanted to keep this nice flat edge here was one of the reasons I purchased another brush. But it's not that I can't use this brush. I just bought another one because I wanted a little bit crisper line. I did a little bit of trimming because I had a couple wild hairs that kind of came out from me working with it. And you'll see the difference between that one and this one. It's just a little fluffier, I guess you'd call it. But still both really good brushes. You can also see that there's a little bit more staining in these bristles, where these bristles are still really nice and clean. But the nice thing about water is you might get the stains, but you're not going to get the clumping inside the bristles like you would with maybe acrylic or especially oil paints. The paint just kind of gradually builds up inside of here until this part up here is just so thick that it doesn't even bend anymore. When you finish using your watercolor brushes, you're going to want to make sure that you clean them really well. So I just have this little jar of water. It's just like a jelly jar, and I just washed it out, and I keep clean water in that, and I use that to rinse out my brushes. And what I usually do is I just stick my brush in there and I swish it really good, and I kind of scrub it a little bit on the bottom, and I just push it down just a little bit and I pull it. I push it down a little bit and I just pull the brush along the bottom, and it kind of squeezes any leftover paint in there, and then I just kind of swirl that around a little bit, and then when it's done I bring it up, drip off the last little bit of water, and then dry it really well with a nice clean towel. The thing you're going to want to make sure is that you dry your brushes completely before you store them. So a lot of times when I'm finished painting, I'll just lay my brushes down like this and let them finish drying. The thing is you don't want to store them upright when they're still wet, because there's water still in these bristles and it's going to soak down into the head of your paintbrush. And even though it's like pinched in there, there's a glue that holds all the hairs in there. And as that water gets into that glue, it breaks the glue down and you're going to start losing your bristles, and your bristles are going to come out. So you don't want to store your paintbrush wet up and down with the head up. But you definitely also don't want to store it with the head down, because you're going to get paintbrushes that after time are going to break down this, it's going to break down the strength of your bristles. So you don't want to store them this way. So the best way to actually store your brushes is flat, to lay them flat. I don't store mine this way. I let them dry this way, and then once they're dry, I have just a case that I just have a little holder that I put them in and keep them there. That way I can see them and they're easier for me. But definitely just want to make sure that they're dry. The last thing you don't want to do is to take your paintbrush, go to rinse it out, and then just leave it in your water. Definitely an artist no-no. And the reasons are the same, that the water is going to get up into the head of the paintbrush, going to eat away at that glue, and you're going to lose your bristles. But especially if your paintbrushes have a wooden handle, the wood is actually going to expand. It's going to loosen this grip here, and you're going to find that this is loose. So this one, I did an artist no-no, and I left this one in the water overnight, and so the wood swelled, and you'll see that the varnishing has cracked off, and so it's getting all messy. But worst of all is that this is now not secure anymore. So after a while this will fall apart. So I have sentenced this paintbrush to an early demise. It will not last as long as it would have had I taken good care of it. So rinse your paintbrushes off, but do not let them soak in the water. Paintbrushes do not like swimming lessons, so don't let them go swimming. This is what also happened to this one here. It soaked a lot and the paint broke off. I have to admit I'm the worst at this, about leaving my paintbrushes in the water, because I get so into my paintings that I forget about it, and then I get called away and blah blah blah, whatever. Don't do it, because you'll ruin your paintbrushes and you have to go back and buy more. So now I want to quickly cover how to store your watercolor paper. And the best way to store your paper is actually store it flat, to keep it laying flat. You don't want to store it standing up on end because the paper might eventually, with time, bend a little bit. So you leave it stored flat. And also, if it has a flap to it, keep that flap closed. It keeps my papers clean and dust-free, or minimally dust-free. Especially if I'm working on one. Here's a painting that I started. I did the sketch for it, inked it in, have not got around to painting it. And so until I do, I just keep this flap closed, and that protects the integrity of the paper. This is also how I store my finished pieces. I always store them flat, because if you store them standing up, then they're really going to get warped very easily. So I will either keep them in like a cardboard mailing envelope to kind of help protect them, or in a plastic, kind of one of those paper protectors to keep them safe. Some of my just random sketches I'll just kind of stack up, but they're always laying flat so that they don't warp. And I already talked about this a little bit in my All About Paints video that I did. I think it was my first watercolor 101 episode. But just a quick reminder that when you're done with your paints, to either put something over top of them to keep the dust out of them, or if you have a watercolor case that closes, to make sure that you close that up, because you don't want any dust, lint, or hair to get into your paints, because it will ruin them, and then you'll have to clean them all out and start fresh, and that's wasting a lot of paint. So if you don't have one that closes, just put a bag or something over it so that it can keep the dust out of it. The last thing I want to talk about is water. When you do watercolor painting, the number one thing you want to remember is to keep your watercolor water clean. If I have been painting a lot with red and I go and I rinse this out, now I have red tinted water, and that's going to contaminate any other colors that I want to use. So I think we have covered every single tool that we need to really talk about to do some basic watercolor paintings. There's other tools that I will get into as we get more advanced into watercoloring, but this is just the basics. If you can have some brushes and paints and paper and water, you're ready to go. So our next episode, we'll be talking about watercolor techniques and how to start getting used to it and maybe paint a fun picture. So I look forward to having you join me for our next Watercolor 101 video here on Art a la Carte. Thanks for watching. God bless you guys, and we'll see you later. Bye-bye. Oh, shoot. Oh, shoot.